Good morning. Well, want to welcome the members, staff, and a lot of guests today. Thank you all for being here. The first order, well, we had a number of presentations today and an even greater number of resolutions to consider. The first of those resolutions is the one which, if approved, will result in the approval of minutes. You've all had a chance to read the minutes?
Point of order. Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir, I'm sorry. Please forgive me now. May we have a roll call
Yes, sir.
for the members who are present? Forgive me.
Calling roll call. Chairman Carney,
He's here.
Member Fernandez Ketchum. Member Freed,
Present.
Member Golden,
Here.
Member Sue, Member Shaw, Member Zerilli.
Here.
We have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary, and forgive my oversight. The first order of business then will be the consideration of the resolution to approve the minutes of September 11th. You've all had a chance to read those minutes. Are there any concerns with the minutes? Are there any questions, any changes recommended? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to approve?
So moved. Second.
All right, we got a motion and a second. Mr. Secretary, will you
Yes.
take the roll call?
Yes.
Do roll call vote, please?
Yes. Mr. Freed, how do you vote?
Approved.
Mr. Golden,
Approved.
Mr. Zerilli, Chairman.
Approved.
It's approved. Unanimous.
Thank you very much. We were fortunate this morning to sit with the joint audit committee. That committee comprises members from this board and from the Water Finance Authority Board. We received what I thought was a very fine presentation from Grant Thornton. Thank you. We must now consider, the committee voted to recommend the approval of the audited financial statements to both boards, the Water Finance Authority Board and the Water Board. We will now consider whether or not this board will approve. I assume we will, but I'd like to hear, Nick, what you have to say before we do it.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Chair Carney. Good morning, everyone. So we did report to the Joint Audit Committee the formal results of the audit to discharge our responsibilities as the external auditor. To highlight the key aspects of that presentation, during the course of the audit, we did not identify any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in internal controls over financial reporting. Our audit procedures did not disclose or identify any instances of fraud or non-compliance. We did not have any significant audit adjustments identified during the course of the audit. Throughout the audit process, we had the full cooperation of the management team. Management was well prepared for the audit. We completed the audit on time and on budget because of those factors. And then finally, included in the draft financial statements that were being presented for approval is our audit opinion, and it is an unmodified or clean audit report, which is the best report an organization can receive.
Nick, thank you. First of all, congratulations to Raymond Lee who produced those excellent financial statements. Thank you, Raymond. Are there any questions for Nick, for Grant Thornton? Hearing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve the resolution.
So moved.
Second. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, John. Mr. Secretary, would you take a roll call resolution?
Member Freed, how do you vote?
Approved.
Mr. Golden,
Approved.
Mr. Zerilli,
Approved.
and Chairman Carney, how do you vote on the
To
resolution?
approve.
It's approved.
Thank you.
Unanimous.
Thanks very much. The next order of business is to review the resolution and vote on the resolution to approve the investment guidelines and fiscal year investment report. Nick, thank you. Thank you for being
Thank you very much. Have a great day, everyone.
Is there any discussion of the investment guidelines or any materials?
The investment, there's no changes proposed to the investment guidelines.
I mean, that was my question. These seem similar, if not the same. to what we-
They're identical to the
Yeah.
last year's guidelines.
Thank you very
There's a
much.
treasury security.
Got it. Are there any questions? Hearing none, may I have a motion to approve the resolution?
So moved.
Thank you. Second. John, thank you. Sir,
Yes. Taking the roll on the resolution. Mr. Freed, how do you vote?
Approved.
Mr. Colvin?
Approved.
Mr. Zerino?
Approved.
Chairman Carney, how do you vote on the resolution?
to approve.
It's approved.
Thank you. We have a presentation, is the next order of business, requesting that the board approve the retention of a water quality consultant.
So, Mr. Chair, we're joined today by some team from the Upstate Watershed System, the water supply system, Dave Warren, Assistant Commissioner, Lori Emery of Water Quality, and Lori Michon, who works with Lori Emery, and they're going to walk you through this presentation on PFAS, which I will not say the scientific name. I will leave it to them.
Yes.
So, please, guys. Sure.
And welcome, thank you for being here.
If I may, I'm just going to move this over so it's easier to see and be seen. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning and present and request your support for a proactive assessment of one of our key reservoirs as it pertains to the potential risk from PFAS compounds. As Joe said, I'm joined by two of my colleagues today, Lori Emery, who is our Director of Water Quality and Innovation, and Lori Chung, who is our Chief of Natural Resources. Lori Chung is going to give you the bulk of the presentation today, and Lori Emery and I are here primarily to answer questions that you may have. So PFAS, the compounds, as a class of compounds, have been of interest and have been on the radar, on the horizon for the water industry and for the public health community for many, many years. DEP actually began its first monitoring for these compounds in 2009. Is that right? So we've been aware of this for some time. In recent years, there has been much more significant interest from the regulatory community, both at a state and a federal level, and much more interest in the public. A lot more press about these compounds and their presence in the environment. And in fact, I think the Water Board had asked some questions, perhaps back in the summer, and were provided with a fact sheet that Lori Emery and her team had prepared as it pertains to the water supply. At BWS, we're very mindful that part of maintaining an excellent water quality, an excellent water supply system, is maintaining the confidence of our water supply consumers that we're being proactive about measures to ensure long-term protection of the quality of the water. And so we're feeling a sense of urgency at this point, given the public attention and the regulatory attention on these compounds, to take a proactive look at one of our key reservoirs to understand our potential risk as it relates to the evolving regulatory standards that are being developed. So, as I said, Lori's going to walk you through the presentation today and answer sort of three key questions: why PFAS, why Kensico, and why now? With that, I'll turn it over to Lori, and Lori Emery and I will remain here available to answer questions as we go through.
Thanks, Dave. I assume whoever's sitting there will advance. Is that
I'll
the
take
setup?
that back.
Okay. So yeah, Dave, thank you so much for that introduction and background. I'll go into some of that in a little bit more depth, and I'll just take the next slide. So again, as Dave said, my goal today is to relay to you why we are interested in doing a PFAS study at this point in time through a water board mechanism, water board contracting mechanism, and why we are choosing to begin this investigation at Kensico. So we'll just jump right in. So I'll start with a little bit of background. I know you've had some fact sheets supplied in this maybe review, but it's a good place to start. So PFAS stands for per or polyfluoroalkyl substances, and now that I said that right, I'm good to go. So these chemicals were introduced in the 40s. They're man-made chemicals, and given their properties as non-stick, water-resistant, fire retardant, flame-resistant, flame retardants, they became ubiquitous. They enjoyed a multitude of uses throughout industry, and so at this point they are considered to be fairly ubiquitous in the environment. They're characterized by that strong carbon to fluorine bond that doesn't really occur much in nature, and that makes them tend to be persistent out in the environment, which is how they got the nickname of forever chemicals. So some of the earlier PFAS compounds, PFOS and PFOA, and I'm not going to attempt to tell you what that stands for, health effects as they became recognized, some of those earliest PFAS compounds were phased out of industrial use in the early 2000s, but numerous replacement compounds were synthesized since then. And so at this point, you'll read that there's thousands of types of PFAS chemicals out there, and research is suggesting that some of them have health effects, and some of them may have health effects at very low levels, and some of them can actually be additive. Different chemicals can combine to create health effects. So with that background said, I'll take the next slide.
Just one quick question.
Yes.
There's thousands of kinds of PFAS.
Yeah.
Only these two, PFOS and PFOA, were actually phased out. So there's still production of many.
There's still production, yeah.
And is this I think of this as like Teflon? Is that one of the popularized versions
I
of
believe so, yeah.
PFAS?
I believe so.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so next. So Dave mentioned the increase in regulatory attention, so I just wanted to summarize that for you. So New York State DOH has been regulating PFOS and PFOA, two chemicals, in drinking water since 2020. And then last year, they proposed some regulations involving about 25 PFAS compounds. 19 of those are just notification levels only, but nonetheless, the number of compounds that they're looking at is increasing. Earlier this year, the EPA proposed a federal drinking water standard for PFOA and PFOS at a level lower than what the state currently regulates. And their proposal also has a combined index of 4 additional PFAS. So, and it also as part of its regulatory process, the EPA has set extremely low maximum contaminant level goals. They're not regulatory standards, it's just a goal, and a health advisory level. And those levels that they set are below current laboratory abilities to even detect them. And that is really what caught a lot of attention, is sending the signal that the thresholds are increasingly lowering. So as you are all well aware, collectively this has brought a lot of attention from utilities and the public and the media to this issue.
Well, if you can't measure.
Yeah. Well, we can measure them at 2 parts per trillion.
Yeah.
And so they cannot place an enforceable regulation below that. So they're currently regulating at, they're proposing to regulate at 4. The state's regulating at 10. But we would expect that the science will continue to evolve, including analytical detection capabilities in the future.
And forgive my ignorance on
No.
this. As it relates to the health impacts, is there, good guidance or conclusive research on at what levels and for what duration? Because I imagine it's both the levels and the length of time you're exposed to PFAS that can relate to, is it cancer or other issues?
So
within
yeah,
health?
it's related to, there are certain types of cancers, certain reproductive effects, developmental effects, immunological compromising effects. In terms of what levels, the fact that they set that health advisory level for PFOS and PFOA so low suggests that they have some research that does indicate that it's low. I can't speak to exposure times, I just don't know that. And then the other thing is the body of science is just so, I wanna say, young and evolving. And so I think they're going at it with an abundance of a conservative approach. Does that sound reasonable, Laura? Yeah?
Yeah, sure. I would add to that as part of the federal process, EPA actually does epidemiological studies on these compounds, and they really do have to look at each one individually and then potential cumulative effects of, because a lot of things out there contain multiple PFAS compounds. So as Lori said, it's a pretty new body of science that's looking at this, and based on the occurrence of PFOS and PFOA, those are like the most common in the environment. Those were the two that they focused on first. So now we're evolving into these other compounds, and the analytical capabilities of the laboratory instrumentation that's used to detect these continues to improve. So even though we're saying for PFOA and PFOS, we can now see down to 2 parts per trillion, we are expected to be able to detect much lower levels in the future. So this will be an evolving science, and it's, as Lori said, gotten a lot of attention because of the health effects.
Thank you.
One more question. We'll focus obviously on the water system here, but does there need to be looking at contamination in the air, in the ground, are there other
We-
exposure? Maybe that's not
I
for,
think-
for you guys to answer, but
But we do, yeah, and you're right, Dan, there is some concern with the same contaminants as they may also be present in wastewater as we go through the wastewater process. However, that's a whole other
Yeah.
realm that we're gonna have to deal with separately, because it's also about what is the point source that is coming into our system. Just as Lauren got into where the point sources are here, but it's very, a very different dynamic when you're dealing within the wastewater system versus in the water system.
Right.
So, but it's definitely, you're right, we are thinking about that, and we are gonna have to, look forward to that as well. But right now, it's, the focus is, and we'll let it go through the
Sure.
presentation on this
Yeah.
part, yeah.
But I think your instinct is correct, we're going to see point sources and non-point use sources out in the environment. Okay, that's good for that one.
And I would also just, Lori sits on the New York State Drinking Water Quality Council. That you want to describe what the council does?
Sure. Yeah, so the council, has been around for 5 or 6 years, and it's a panel of experts who sit together to provide recommendations to the health department, to the New York State Department of Health on the regulatory process. And, one of the first charges of that council, my predecessor, Steve Schindler, sat on the council, and they were part of the decision to regulate PFOA and PFAS, and we're also meeting to review EPA's proposal and also expand the regulatory realm for the state. So next meeting is in November, and again, this is getting a lot of regulatory attention, not only in New York but really across the nation.
Wait, how often does that council meet?
It's about twice a year, and this particular topic is causing us to meet more often, and it's important work, and it really does drive drinking water regulations in the state of New York. So the fact that we've been focused on this one subject for 3 or 4 meetings here recently says a lot about the attention it's getting.
And are its members all experts in whatever their specific areas might be, or are there lay people on the council?
Yeah, so it's pretty diverse individuals on the council. 2 of us are from water utilities, myself and a gentleman from Long Island. There are several health experts on the panel. So everybody's got their area of expertise, all which contribute to getting a broad understanding of the topic and how it impacts a number of segments of
Sure.
society.
Thank you. Sure.
Yeah, so DEP is very fortunate to have Lori's representation on the council to make sure that the water industry voice is heard and also benefits from what she's learning as part of that process. So just wanted to acknowledge that as part of the
Thank you
discussion.
very
So
much.
turn it back to Lori.
Okay, so I hope we've covered the why PFAS, why now part. So I'm gonna turn over and I'll have a draft scope of work later, but we have chosen to focus the start of this investigation on Kensico, and I want to kind of explain why. Before I do that, I want to give a brief overview of the water supply. I'm sure it's reviewed to you, but it's important to do that to show the important context in which Kensico sits. So of course, the water supply to the city comes from the upstate 2,000 square mile area watersheds. East of Hudson is largely the Croton system. That supply is about 10% under normal operating configurations of the city supply, and that's a filtered supply. And the data we have, the filtration media used at the Croton filtration plant is effective at removing PFAS and PFOA. Going across the river to the Catskill and Delaware, which is 90% of the city's supply on normal operating routines. So that's the bulk of the supply, and it's unfiltered. And it all travels down through the Catskill and Delaware aqueducts to Kensico. So Kensico is sort of the last stop where that unfiltered water sits before it's sent over for UV and then onto distribution. So it's you can see it's a critical location. It's collecting all of that unfiltered water, which is why we call it a reservoir that receives water from other reservoirs, a terminal reservoir in our system. Okay. So I wanted to zoom in and show you Kensico a little bit up a little bit more close. So in the top right, I guess left for you guys, is the Catskill Aqueduct coming down. That is a source of water to the reservoir. And on the other side, we have the Delaware Aqueduct coming in. So those are the two main inflows. But also, all of those blue tributaries, the light blue lines, are streams. They all contribute flow to the reservoir as well, and they're inside the reservoir's drainage basin, which is delineated in brown. So those are the three main sources, would be the aqueducts and the streams. And it's important to point out that those streams, under base flow, when we're not having a storm, only contribute about 0.5% of the volume of the water in that reservoir. So 99.5 is coming in from aqueducts. And then the other thing from this slide is the critical point where the water flows out to the system is what we call Del 18 right there. So that's the outflow. So next slide. I was going to walk you through some of the results that we have to date when we sampled for PFAS. As Dave indicated, we've been sampling since from as far back as 2009, before we were ever required to do so. But using current EPA accepted methodology, we have not detected these compounds at either of those reservoir inflows, those aqueduct inflows from the upstate watershed. And we haven't detected it at Del 18 at the outflow. That's great news. Full disclosure, in 2009 and 2010, they were using non-approved methodology that was still experimental in development, and they did pick up some ultra-low levels at that outflow, ultra-low being down in like parts per quadrillion, like we're regulating up at parts per trillion, so extremely low levels were detected with methods that we just simply can't validate. And the other thing is that the streams have been sampled in the basin a number of times. And those are the yellow triangles mark where we've collected PFAS samples from the Kensico Basin streams, and all of them have PFAS chemicals in them. The highest concentrations are associated with the Westchester County Airport, those two streams there, big red airplane. And it's important to point out that that is a registered brownfield site. The levels coming off of that are about 100 times higher than the rest of the streams. So the state and the county are working together on site investigation and remediation plans. But again, all the other have much lower levels, but they have been detected. Okay? So just to recap, while our unfiltered Catskill and Delaware system has not exceeded regulatory standards or really even had a detection, we feel that the future is less certain because we know that the number of compounds that are being regulated, we've seen a trend that that's increasing. The levels at which they're being regulated, we're seeing a trend that that's decreasing. And we only expect both of those trends to continue as health research increases, analytical detection capabilities increase. And also just to recap, and we know that we've detected them in the streams in the Kensico Basin. And we have one known point source at this point in time, which is that airport.
Can I ask a quick question about, you found them in the tributaries coming into the Kensico,
Yeah.
not in high volumes in the reservoir itself.
Right.
Have you done similar testing in any of the streams in the Catskill Delaware aqueduct to see if there are areas that may be concerned in the future?
Like I think the 2009 study hit a couple random points. I think the DEC does some rotating things. They have taken some measurements, but we don't have a systematic program in place to sample for those compounds in upstate streams. The regulatory samples are required at like distribution points, so we don't have a lot of systematic samples. Like I said, to date, those aqueduct inflows using current methods are at 0, so we haven't gone that way yet. But that could be a step that's recommended out of the study that we want to fund. So again, we are seeking a proactive approach to see if we can identify additional sources in that critical Kensico Basin. Have someone evaluate their remediation potential, and even mathematically, if they were remediated, would they even make a difference, given that that basin is about 0.5% of the water in there. And so with that said, we have developed a draft scope of work, which is on the next slide. So we would like to seek services to bring someone on to do a desktop analysis using existing records, land use records, industrial records, aerial photography, to see if they can point us to where there could be possible additional point sources in that basin. We'd also like to give this consultant all of the data that we've collected to date, and to sort of kind of estimate what is our future risk. Could they do some kind of mathematical exercise where they're evaluating our future risks under future more stringent scenarios? And then third, just after we've presented them, the information that we have available to us, make us some recommendations. What are the gaps, what are the sources, so that we can truly understand and manage the risk.
Are there any other systems, water systems out there that you see as have best practices or are?
I think it's so new that from a source water protection, I think from thinking of PFAS from a source water protection standpoint, a study like this would sort of be cutting edge. We're seeing a lot of end of the line treatment, but from taking a step back from a full watershed source water evaluation, I think we'd be on the forefront of that.
And
Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, and I would just add that there are only a tiny handful of public water supply systems across the country that are unfiltered, like our Catskill Supply.
Right.
And so many of the systems, to the extent that they're focused on these compounds, are probably thinking on about treatment modification, if
Right.
necessary. As Lori is saying, I think there are very few that are thinking proactively about the sources and potential mitigation at a source scale.
And how well do we understand the sources? Like if you, that desktop analysis, looking for probably more like industrial sites, is it landfills, or do we have a good sense of what the universe of point sources are?
We do, and in compiling the draft scope, we would provide the consultant with like, here's the work we've done, this is what the literature's suggesting, we've got a list of about, 15 or 20 places where they can start. And hopefully they can bring some expertise to us too and say, hey, you may have missed this. But yes, definitely landfills, old industrial uses, so yeah.
Airports.
Airports.
And then last question, do we have in-house capability for doing this testing, or do we do this with third parties?
Yeah, so this is currently done through a contract lab. So, we go out and we collect the samples, but we work with a contract laboratory who is really at the cutting edge of this science. It's our goal to ultimately bring the work in-house, but we're really at the point where these methods are still developing and refining. And so, we feel like we need to go to the best place we can at this point, and that's a contract laboratory.
Here in New York.
No, they're actually out of Monrovia, California,
Okay.
where regulations are even more stringent in most cases in New York.
Got it.
So,
How long have you had that result?
gosh, we've been with them for several years now. I would say well over 15 years. They've changed
Really?
names over time, but these guys are really at the cutting edge of analytical chemistry.
Okay, and so I just wanted to wrap up saying, so why are we approaching or suggesting this approach that we work with the water board? Just given the time sensitivities surrounding the evolving regs and the environment and evolving science, we feel that we really need a flexible contracting mechanism in order to be truly proactive. And just to fire through some of the examples, we've discussed that there is a subject of growing attention. EPA had put out there that we were expecting regulations by the end of this year. I mean, no matter when they finalize them, what's proposed we'll be okay with, but in terms of maintaining compliance, it looks like. But beyond that, again, those regulatory thresholds are going to become more stringent, so that's going to be constantly changing. And we're just trying to proactively understand our risks and our risks from that source water protection side of things, which is a sort of I want to say a novel approach as we discussed with drinking water. We want to be proactive so that when things start tightening up, we actually have an actionable list of steps and recommendations that come out of this study, as opposed to waiting, reacting, then procuring. Obviously, it will help us get conclusions quickly, and we can just move on to understanding our next steps and preparing for them. And then finally, because this is an emerging contaminant, these are emerging contaminants, and the science is evolving, we really want to get a feel for which contractors are truly equipped to take this on with us. And that's going to probably cause us to stop mid-process, ask questions, change approach, and I think a water board approach would give us more flexibility in that regard. So that's it for me. I just want to thank you for your time and your consideration as we figure out how to take on these challenges and maintain our important mission. So thank you.
Thank you. Joe, this is probably for you. Is there also a litigation strategy that is like on the horizon around this as well? That, like similar to like NTB or other prior contaminants that we're going to spend a lot of money dealing with this.
Yeah. And I think to Lori's point that this is so new and emerging, we don't know to what extent we're going to have and what level of risk is going to be for the system. And also, I think to the point too is that, as we talked a little earlier, it's not just for the water supply, it's all for the wastewater side as well, because they are going to start looking at what is the quality of water being discharged into harbor bodies.
Right.
And that, I think, is where you have a larger degree of risk because, and here again, I'm not a scientist,
Standards,
but yeah, there's point sources that are like, why are people releasing or discharging, industrial or, compromised, water into the wastewater stream? We think here, I think that, as Lori pointed out, the compactness of the KENS code, this criticality of the KENS code, the timeliness of this as emerging, to be able to do it in such a contained base, then we're probably going to have to grow this from there, both looking at on the west of Hudson side, and then also moving in probably in a much larger scale onto, down in the city. And that's where I think we're going to have a lot more problems and a lot more of the risk as well. I won't speak to litigation. I mean, I don't know, Val, if you want to opine.
Yeah,
as, Yeah.
I don't think this is a big item on the radar right now for the water department. But
maybe it
as
should
a
be.
general rule, we're not going to be liable for something that's not regulated.
Oh, I guess I'm thinking of like us suing the manufacturers
Oh.
of this
Yeah.
Okay.
for the
So
cost of cleaning up.
I can add just one piece, and I don't know a lot of details, but just for awareness, there is a class action suit against 3M and potentially other defendants. You know, if other
Yeah,
defendants,
that I'm not sure of, but
Um,
3M is the major.
but it's been brought on behalf of a broad range of entities, including some water utilities. And the law department is evaluating whether New York City Water Supply wants to participate in that class or not. So I don't know any more details than that, and I don't want to
Sure, no,
comment beyond my awareness, but just I know that is out there and it is actively under consideration.
Great, thank you.
I'd just like to applaud you guys for proactively thinking about this and taking early action to inform what we can do to protect the system at the source. And just as you get the results from this, thinking that I think you're taking the right risk-based approach of let's start at Kensico where we've actually seen things there and think about how it may want to apply again based on that risk-based approach to other streams and tributaries, depending on what you're finding in the characteristics around that. But I really appreciate as a water board member and a water drinker,
Yes.
that you guys are doing this in such an aggressive early action.
Yeah, and another point that Lori and I were discussing on the drive down is that Kensico, PFAS are known to be correlated with higher levels of both suburban and urban development. And so that's another reason why Kensico makes a lot more sense than starting in the west of Hudson watershed or the rest of the Croton system that's going through the filtration plant.
Yeah, and I'll add that the 2009, 2010 studies did include some west of Hudson sites, and we didn't find PFAS compounds. It's not to say we wouldn't revisit some of that work, but that really that work really led us to understand that the real focus was Kensico, primarily because of the Westchester County Airport.
How do we arrive at the scope of the project, the financial scope of the project? I see we have in the resolution an upper bound of $350,000. I'm just wondering where we came up with that number.
So, we were thinking this was akin to firms that might do phase 1 environmental assessments because it's a desktop exercise where they're going out and looking. And so one of our EH&S staff has worked with some consultants and has contacts with DEC that contracts that kind of work out. So she and I actually sat down and said, okay, so how many staff does a firm usually throw at a project like this? What are their rates? How many hours do we think it would take them to do the various components? And it was very simple and straightforward like that, sort of based off of what we've seen done for phase 1. And then we kind of upped it a little bit just because it's a new thing and it's going to require some specialization and knowledge.
And what about term? How long do you expect to retain? I mean, it could be forever. I recognize it.
Yeah.
Renew, but initially, what is the term?
They should, I think a firm should be able to collect existing data, examine existing records, and do it in 2 years. I mean, that's what I think.
Right, the upper bounds laid out here is the 350 and the 2 years for the contract. So anything that comes through in the RFP process that might exceed that, you probably come back, but you've given yourself an envelope that we would be approving.
Have we? I know it's a much bigger project, but have we begun to revisit whether we feel like this is enough of a concern to contemplate a long-term plan to filter the Cadwell water?
That is a very interesting question. I will say we are starting to consider that, but it's probably decades still out, even if we're going to get to that point. But it definitely does start bringing pause into thinking, how do we ever think about what the filtration capacity or the need for filtration on West of Hudson. But, as of now, like I said, I think this will guide us, and if we need to expand it and start looking at the West of Hudson, we will. We don't believe that this is a issue. It may have some, minor impact on the West of Hudson. So we don't really aren't overly concerned with that. I think it's more so like where you have sort of as Lori and Maury identified with around the Westchester County Airport and the development that has happened in, primarily Westchester and Putnam as opposed to the west of Hudson side. So, that's where the real concern is.
But the Kensico water is east of Hudson water?
It's 99.5% delivered from the aqueducts, primarily west of
Okay,
Hudson.
so it is
So it's a small element of base flow that comes in from that 8,400 acre watershed, but the vast majority of it is Cadwell water.
The rest of Croton doesn't go through Kensico.
No, it does not.
But we will definitely be thinking of this going forward and expanding, and that again, we will, be not using probably the board as an outlet, based on the timeliness and the need to get this done. We would be looking at more long-term, larger contract, mechanisms that we have to use to be able to do for the wastewater side, and if we were gonna do anything on the West Hudson side.
Do the home water filtration systems filter out these chemicals?
Yeah, I mean, I'll use the Croton filtration plant as an example. So that uses granular activated carbon. And that's what removes the PFAS compounds. You know, home water filters, you have to really read the label and make sure that, you know, they're removing what you think they're removing, because just putting any old filter on your faucet doesn't necessarily do the trick. We've been through this with lead and many other things. So, you know, that's I'm sure something that, you know, anybody who's looking to sell water filters is going to be saying, but you really have to do your homework on these water filters.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Hearing none, you've had a chance to look at the resolution, it's pretty simple. It proposes an initial term of 2 years at approximately $350,000. It's in the aggregate, so they may hire more than one firm, but the total is $350,000. May I have a motion to approve the resolution?
So moved.
Thank you, Adam. Second?
Second.
Thank you very much, Dan. Mr. Secretary, would you take a roll call? vote?
Yes, taking the roll. Number 3, how do you vote? Golden.
I would approve.
Member Zerito.
Approve.
Chairman
To
Carter.
approve.
Okay, it's approved. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much.
It's a lot of work.
Very,
Thank you,
very
guys.
much appreciate the
It's a lot of
support.
work.
And we'll look forward to coming back and talking with you about the results. So thank you.
All right. The next agenda item is a presentation. We've got HPD and other guests, I gather. Omar, will you tell us who the presenters are?
It's a lot of Cubs and Avs here, and who are you joined by today?
So it's going to be Lasad presenting, instead for questions, and then we also have a few more folks that I can introduce.
Alicia, do you want to come up here as well?
Yeah, I prefer should I sit here?
But if you want to say that,
Okay. Yeah, makes sense.
Now, would you all tell us again who you are?
Yeah.
Or your names up there?
No, they're not up there, so I can introduce ourselves.
Thank you.
Yeah. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to present before the Water Board the Rialto West project, which will entail the transfer of a portion of Manhattan Block 1077, Lot 29 to HPD. And I'm Lasani. I'm the Director of Manhattan Planning at HPD. We are also joined by Zlata Kopstanstev. You might actually know Alicia West from DEP. We got Felipe Cortez, Ariel Goldberg, Ben Lee, and William Sedgwick.
Yes, outnumbered now.
HPD comes with a number of
And if
people.
I may interject, we also have Andy Kaczynski from from our Bureau of Water and Sewer Operations as well, if he needs to, speak as well. So.
Andy, thank you for being here.
So as I mentioned, today we'll discuss the Rialto West project, and it involves the disposition of a portion of Block 1077, Lot 29, in the Clinton neighborhood of Manhattan Community District. So just to go over what I will be presenting to you, I'll provide an overview of the Rialto West project, and go into the background of DEP's use of the subject property, and then we will specifically describe the lot area to be used for the proposed affordable housing project, and then I'll go over the ask from HPD of the Water Board. And this is in order, again, to facilitate the development of a permanently affordable housing development standard. So first, Rialto West project. The Rialto West project will be located in Clinton, the Clinton neighborhood of Manhattan Community District 4. You can see the site here on this map is labeled as 10th Avenue, the DEP site. It originates from commitments made during the Western Rail Yard rezoning process. As part of the negotiations for the Western Rail Yard rezoning, there were two publicly owned sites that were identified for the development of affordable housing. Specifically for the 10th Avenue DEP site labeled here, there were commitments made for a 100% permanently affordable housing project to be developed, as well as an open space operated by the Department of Parks. Pursuant to these commitments, HPD received approval of disposition of a portion of Block 1077, Lot 29 in 2009 from New York City Council. Subsequently, HPD released an RFP, a request for proposals, in April 2018, and after careful consideration of submissions, selected the Rialto West project in 2019. In order to facilitate the Rialto West project, HPD pursued 4 additional land use actions and received approvals of those actions from City Council in 2022. So here you can see a rendering of the affordable housing project known as Rialto West. It'll be an 8-story mixed-use building containing approximately 157 permanently affordable units, as well as 1 superintendent's unit. The rents for this project will be affordable to individuals and households earning between 50% and 120% AMI, and there will also be a 15% set aside for formerly homeless households. Over half the building will have 2- and 3-bedroom units. And then there will also be, in addition to the residential uses, ground floor community facility space, serving the local arts and theater community, and then a public comfort station that will serve the adjacent open space.
Will that be a park, or will that be
It will be an open space.
so like a Pops?
No.
It will remain under DEP ownership, and we have a MOU with the Parks Department about,
I'm sorry, say it again.
it will remain under DEP jurisdiction, but we have an MOU with the Parks Department for the maintenance and operation of the open space.
It's really operative, but a publicly accessible space, not just for the residents of the.
Yes.
Right,
Yeah,
this will be
so-
open to the public. And then, as well as the comfort station that is associated with it in the building, publicly accessible. HPD anticipates financial closing December 2023, and for the construction to be complete in 2026.
2026?
Yes, it's a complicated project.
And one quick question, I saw on the map, not on this one, which is a bit earlier, but you don't have to go back.
Okay.
Is this is not above the rail line? Is it adjacent to it, or is it above it?
It's above it, so I'll go into that.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah. All right, so background of Block 1077, Lot 29, and then I'll actually go into the lot split and how that's all divided up. So you can see an aerial image here. The site is located along 10th Avenue between 48th and 49th Streets. On the western side of the image, you can see that there is a open rail cut for the Amtrak Empire line right away. And the affordable housing development will be developed over said rail. As far as DEP, use of the site, DEP acquired the site in the early 90s for the purposes of using it for construction staging for the development of the city's water tunnel number 3. And the project was completed in 2013. I threw a few dates at you with DEP and HPD's involvement in the site, so this is just a timeline to give you a visual representation of how DEP acquired the site, how they use the site, and then how the Western Rail Yards rezoning plays into the history here and the approvals for the Rialto West project. So, as I've already mentioned, the request will be for the transfer of a portion of existing lot 1077, block 1077, lot 29. So I wanted to really clearly lay out how we are planning on subdividing the lot into 2 tax lots, and which lots will be used for the affordable housing development and which lots will remain under DEP jurisdiction. Again, you can see an aerial image here. The black outline is the entirety of current block 1077, lot 29. And then you can see on the western side of the lot, we have tentative lot 29, which is where the affordable housing development will be built. As far as the rest of the site, you can see it outlined in green on the eastern portion. This is what in your materials is referred to as the future open space, or tentative lot 35. You'll also notice on tentative lot 35, there's this blue shaded area. This is for a light and air easement that is required in order for the building to have legal windows, which we need to have units in. So this is a dimension map of what you saw previously. Again, on the western portion of the lot, you will see tentative lot 29, which is referred to as the site. In your materials, it has about approximately 100 feet of frontage on 48th Street, 118 feet of frontage on West 49th Street, and it is about 201 feet in depth. You also see it starts approximately 125 feet from 10th Avenue. It contains 21,923 square feet of lot area. Tentative lot 35 is approximately 25,104 square feet of lot area. And then, as you can see dimensioned out, the light and air easement is about 200.83 feet by 30 feet in depth.
Does this imply, and maybe you get to this, that the non-light and air portion of lot 35 could still be built on in the future?
Yes.
To DEP, or could transfer that, could get rid of the MOU of parks, and the open space goes away?
That's not the intention. The intention is to maintain as much flexibility on the site that remains DEP's, because we do have infrastructure below ground there, and we want to make sure that if there is any need in the future, that we still have the ability to build a structure should we need to. We don't have plans to currently, but we've worked very closely with HPD over the last year or so to figure out what our needs might potentially be and make sure that we can work within these parameters.
So maybe I missed this then. You acquired the lot originally for staging, but there is actually DEP infrastructure built on that portion of lot 35?
Yeah, so let me clarify. So this is one of the shaft sites for Water Tunnel 3.
Okay.
So we do have infrastructure on the southeastern corner of this site. We have been working with Parks Department on the design of the open space to ensure that we still have the access that we need, the 24/7 access that we need, and that the public amenities are built in such a way that would facilitate that. And that's been a very fruitful process. We've done that for a few other similar sites in Manhattan. So that design is completed with the Parks Department, and as I said, we have a standing MOU with Parks.
And that's why you're keeping jurisdiction of the site.
Yes.
And you have the MOU for management, but you have the underlying control of the property long term?
Yes.
That's what DEP is saying?
Yes.
Thank you.
So now we can go into the water board request. I hope that it's very clear how that's all split up.
Before you continue, can I ask, the easement strip there, what does that mean functionally? That nothing can be built on there, or nothing of a certain height can be built? you know, what does that translate into with these?
Right, no permanent, building or structure can be built within that 30-foot easement at all.
Ever.
We can build temporary, if we're constructing, we can build temporary structure.
And I guess one further question we get into, I know you're working with the Parks Department on the design functionality. Is this area in there that has capacity constraints to the sewer system? Are you looking at green infrastructure as a way of building it into the site? That first picture you had up had a lot of impermeable pavement, and I know renderings are renderings, not designs, but just thinking about that, or are you limited in that given the infrastructure that's on the
You're
ground?
asking specifically about the open space
Yeah,
design?
but purely for the open space.
Yeah, so one of the primary goals for the public open space design was to keep the surface as permeable as possible,
Okay.
so those are permeable features.
I assume that was the answer, but.
But I do want to emphasize the importance of still maintaining access
100%.
for, you know, our shared site.
And maybe before you get to the question, the rail impacts, that was never DEP property, that was Amtrak property, or did DEP control that lot?
The surface level would be DEP jurisdiction. We had to go through a separate process with Amtrak to,
Yeah.
There was a very long approvals process with them before we could even,
They maintain their right of way access.
right, we had to get sign off from Amtrak.
Yeah.
Before we could even approach, TCP land use approvals, so that was
Nice.
part of the process. And we finished.
But that's no longer DEP's problem because of that's been transferred to HPD and the affordable housing development, or does DEP still have a role with the rail line?
So one of the actions today is that parcel to be transferred for use for HPD to
So
build this
DEP's out of the business of that rail line interaction,
Yes,
for at least this lot.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So, HPD is requesting today for from the water board for the transfer of the site, tentative lot 29 to HPD, as well as the disposition of a negative easement on tentative lot 35 for the Benova site in connection with an approximately 30-foot deep by 200.83-foot light and air easement, as well as the transfer of approximately 39,646 square feet of development rights associated with tentative lot 35. Again, approvals of this request will help to facilitate the Rialto West project, which is going to be bringing really direly needed affordable housing, permanently affordable housing to Manhattan Community District 4. So, thank you for listening to our presentation, and if you have additional questions, let me know.
You've already said this, I just can't remember now, the projected completion date for the housing building.
It's 2026.
2026.
I have no questions, but just would like to say my enthusiastic support and really impressed at how you guys are working together. I know bringing together multiple agencies, including Amtrak and others, is not easy, but this is the creativity that's needed and the focus on it. So, you know, dealing with the critically important issue of affordable housing, I just really want to applaud all the different outfits, super staffs that are involved in this and focus on it. Really important project, and maintaining the flexibility and access to the DEP side is paramount important, but we need to do this more often and more creatively, so just want to applaud everyone involved in that.
So we'd expect it to be great.
Definitely endorse that. I know how complicated all this can be, and this is an incredibly important project. One that, maybe just a clarification, I'm sure you have a good answer to this. Why aren't we taking those remaining air rights and just building more affordable housing on this site? Those air rights are going to be useless anywhere else, is I think my understanding. Why didn't we just go bigger and forego it forever on this site?
So the site was very carefully negotiated with the surrounding community. For this specific project, as part of the points of agreement, there was an agreement to limit the height to 77 feet for the building. So yeah,
Understood. Okay. Thank you.
So leave that deal with community boards and which must have been extraordinarily difficult to do. I can't even imagine. I'll echo what everybody else has said. It's fabulous program, fabulous project. But thank you all for all the work you had to do to get it this far.
And I echo it as well. One quick clarification point that I had. We're being asked to release the lot 29 from the lease that we have with the city, right? The city retains title to the property either way. Is that correct?
Yeah,
the lease by itself doesn't result in a transfer of title. It gives the city, gives DCAS and HPD the ability to negotiate the transfer documents and transfer the title, records the title to the development partner. But the lease by itself doesn't result in a transfer of title.
The property is retained by the city, right?
So we're not actually transferring ownership, we're just releasing that part of the leasehold, and then the city will do the rest of it. To make it we're releasing the tacit veto the leasehold constitutes, and then the city agency, in this case DCAS, presumably negotiate the documents to transfer the title. But unless it does so, the draft title won't transfer. And it sounds like we're comfortable that we have the access we need for maintenance and other purposes. I take it that there's no foreseeable reason we would need to use the Lot 29 property for any water system use going forward? That's correct. Our consulting engineers at AECom and Macon Devi visited the site last month. They performed their usual inspection and review. They certified in writing that there's a copy of the letter in the packet verifying there's no operational impact, there's no future need for water and sewer purposes for that section.
And that's also, Jonathan, important why, to Adam's earlier point too, where I wouldn't quite characterize it as a park, but more of the open space, because there will be a limited ability for them, and that's where we're going to have to work very closely with parks in terms of what we can allow in there, because there may be the need at any certain point in time. Andy can speak better to this than I could about, what kind of equipment or other things we may have to bring onto that site should we, in any reason, have to get access to our shaft sites. So that's where it's got to be, and we've done something similar in like locations within Manhattan, so that we've gotten the community the space they wanted, something that they can use either as recreational or for just open space, but also accessibility for our, infrastructure.
It's a public open space.
Yeah.
As opposed to a park which comes with restrictions of what you can do there. The elegant solution you guys have developed.
And, well, let's get it done.
Yeah.
There is a. The board has before it a resolution which approved would release certain portions of the land as described during your presentation. Your presentation.
Oh, Melissa?
No, I'm sorry. Forgive me. Are there any further questions? I can't imagine there are. Hearing none, may I have a motion please to approve the resolution?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, John. Mr. Secretary,
Yeah, call
would you
the
roll
roll.
call vote for us?
Yes. Member Freed,
Enthusiastic, yes.
Member Golden,
I approve.
Member Zarrilli,
Approved.
Chairman Carney, how do you vote?
I approve.
It's approved. Resolution.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And good luck.
The hard part may be over for us.
Is there any other business to come before the meeting? I'd just like to make a motion to adjourn. Well, that is business.
We're not going to let it get.
Certainly is business.
No, that's
Seriously, is there any other business to come before the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion please to adjourn?
So moved.
Begin.
Second then.
All right.
Shall I just ask?
Yes.
All in favor, please indicate.
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, sir.